Welcome to Educational Measures webinar, How to Reinvigorate Your Events with Engagement Technology. My name is John Santaferraro. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at Educational Measures, and I'm going to be your host this morning. I want to begin with a few logistics. If you want to tweet, we are going to be doing some live tweeting throughout the webinar. We're using the hashtag EventTech, and you can follow us on EdMeasures, our company account on Twitter, or my personal account, Santaferraro, on Twitter. Feel free to join in the melee there. A couple of logistics. One, the webinar slides and a link to the recording will be distributed within 48 hours of the webinar. That way you can share this with anybody that happened to miss it. Also, there will be a question and answer at the end of the webinar. And so if you go to the right hand side of the GoToWebinar, you'll see a panel there and a little button that says questions. Feel free at any point throughout today's webinar to take a look at, to enter your questions, and we will respond to those at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Ryan Mazon. Ryan Mazon is a Senior Vice President at Educational Measures. He has spent the last 10 years helping clients maximize their investment in meeting technology. His expertise in designing highly interactive, next-generation live meetings makes him invaluable to the meeting planning process. In his career here at Educational Measures, he has touched every aspect of meeting technology implementation. Everything from meeting design and implementation, and from data collection all the way to the post-meeting analytics. And so without further ado, I am going to turn things over to Ryan Mazon. Ryan, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, John. So what I'm going to do here is, when we're talking about how to reinvigorate your events with engagement technology, there's a lot of technologies out there, first of all, and something that we have to all be aware of is, 5 years ago there were a few, 7 years ago there were very few, and now there's up to over 15,000 different types of technologies that are available to the industry. Everything from conference apps to beacon technologies to the little items where you can tag each other and see them at trade shows type of thing. So when we talk about engagement technology, I want to start this whole conversation with what that actually is. And engagement technology is really meant to optimize your attendees in your meetings. So it's not necessarily a networking tool, it's not necessarily a map tool. What this is really meant to do is this is meant to capture every point of interest and every point of impact that your audience is going to have, and it's going to really play out on the way that we look at all of the interactions of the attendees. The way we do it here at Educational Measures is we use these iPads, which you're seeing here on the screen, and it all starts with an email address. So the attendees would put in a email address, and once they are in the system, now they are now part of the experience of Educational Measures. So a little bit about us, for those of you that may not be aware, is Educational Measures, we've been around for almost 15 years now, providing technologies for all types of meetings. We got our start in the continuing medical education industry, which actually was a really good one to start with. I'm looking at the attendees that we have for this webinar, and this audience that is on this webinar is across the industries. So there are meeting planners, there are convention hotel people. There is a lot of anyone who's dealing with a meeting and a transfer of knowledge of what we have to present to who is going to receive it. This is going to speak to you that one of the benefits of working and starting with CME is that industry is based on the data that they collect. So they compete with each other to grab as much information and as much insight into the audience and to measure the transfer of knowledge to to their audiences, and that's how that industry functions. So when we look at that type of scenario, by using lessons learned in that type of environment and applying them across industries, as what we've got this audience here on this webinar, you're really going to be able to see that there's a lot we can do, and this should be very, very insightful into what you can get from your audiences. So I'm going to take it all the way back, and I'm just going to talk about a typical array, educational measures array meeting. Now, this next slide is not a typical education measures array meeting. This is a big pharma forum, huge trade show that we have iPads for all the attendees. Now, the way our system works is we have determined with this type of technology that it's important, and one of the main items that we need to remember is to minimize the vulnerabilities. So the very first vulnerability that educational measures in their array platform is going to eliminate is the need for Wi-Fi from venues. So the way our system works is we set up a private network in every meeting room. So in those meeting rooms, we are transmitting a signal from the server through the network to the iPads. The iPads then will send the information back through that private network and back to the server. So it sort of looks like this. This is a typical setup. Your meeting is going to stay the same. Your meeting will have the main screens in the room, projector, tech table in the back, everything that we're used to. However, our system is going to come in and it's going to mirror what is being presented on the screen. We do that. You'll see it's kind of hard to see here, but there is a access point here, there's an access point here. And what that does is that creates that closed, secure network. So we're not basing anything in our functionality on venues or the internet signal or the 200 devices that need to be pushed out to the internet at the same time in this one meeting room, plus the 5 other meetings that are going on. We are going to create a small network within that room, and then that is going to be secure, so it doesn't matter what happens to the Wi-Fi in the venue. This signal is going to happen and the meeting is going to carry on. Now, we do all sizes of meetings, large scale like we saw in that first Pharma Forum meeting, small scale, advisory boards, speaker trainings, investigator meetings. We do a lot of financial programming. Wherever you need to be able to have that conversation, that engage your audiences in a scenario where it's going to allow them to have their voices heard, is really where you start to engage these audiences. Now, if we think about how to make all of this happen at the same time, I look at 4 steps, and this is the way I kind of break it down. I want to engage the audiences. I want to educate the participants, persuade, which is a very new aspect of technologies, but we want to analyze all of that information. And I'm going to get to those here in a little bit, but way we start by engaging these audiences is, as you're seeing here, the slides are advancing on the iPads for them. This is done at the same time as the slides that are advancing on the main screen in the room. So what this has become is a portal into the information that is being shared. So when the slides advance on the main screen, they're also advancing on the iPads. Now, I break this iPad down into 3 sections. So I've got the live environment of what is happening at the time. I've got the customizable content, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and then the interactive tools that we're going to give your audience. So now the audience is very, very important to this, because what is important to them is really going to give us our data and our analytics after the fact. But break it all the way down, it all starts with just a PowerPoint. Now, when slides are going through and they're streaming, there's a couple of things that the audience is going to be able to do to interact with this. The number one and the biggest button that we have and our best data capture point, I believe, is our Ask a Question button. Now, our Ask a Question button is real-time organic feedback to what is being presented. This can be anything, and I can tell you, in your meetings, you are going to get a lot of questions. Questions are coming in, thoughts are coming in, ideas are coming in at a rate that is going to be very substantial. So a lot of my clients, when they are planning their meetings, and they used to plan for 5 minutes of Q&A, or maybe we'll skip it and we'll just do it at the end of the day, you're going to notice that your audience has something to say, and they're going to let you know, and they're going to do it right here through this Ask a Question button. A great thing about this is that when they submit the question, it will go to a presenter iPad, which looks like this. This is the holding area of all of the questions that are going to come into the devices. Now, we are engaging them. We're asking them their thoughts. As things are going through, we're seeing what's important to them. My recommendation is, instead of putting this in front of a speaker who is going through their flow and going through their slides, is put this in front of a moderator or a staff member. Because what they can do at that point is they can kind of triage these questions that are coming in. So when it does come time for Q&A, what they can do is they can almost formulate a conversation. Now, this is not a scary microphone. This is not something where someone has to stand up, walk to the microphone in the middle of the room, and ask a question that may or may not, in their own mind, not be a good question. So by giving them this anonymous feature to be able to ask these questions, we're going to be able to capture every thought that's happening. When the staff member or the moderator now wants to see the questions that are coming in, and say we have a lot of questions that focus on the same thing, now we've identified a trend, something that is important to the audience as a whole. So that is going to be very, very impactful. If they want to triage these questions and say, I'm going to take this one and mark them as important, we can set up as many of these iPads as we want to then have that specific conversation be displayed for whoever is going to be answering those questions. So this is a very, very integral part of our platform. This gets the people engaged. Once they are asking questions and they are being reinforced by responses, they're able to really be part of the event. Now, in many cases, and one of the trends that I'm seeing using this type of technology is that we get so many questions that there's no way to answer all of them. But what we've done is we've identified another opportunity to get in touch with our attendees. Because what we can do, and some of my forward-thinking clients have done, is they've taken the best questions that were not answered in the program and then creating an FAQ follow-up. So when we send these the information back to the attendees, they're going to get an additional document that will have questions where we were not able to get to, and then responses that were contributed by the speakers. Now, another way for the attendees to interact is they can also take notes. Okay, they can draw notes, save slides. So what this does, and this all ties back to that email address that we entered in the very beginning. So you'll notice here, anytime there's something comes up that they want to keep this slide or they want to save this for their own information, what they're actually doing, and we're giving them the opportunity to create a personal portfolio of information that's important to them. Now, this might be a new thought for many of you. And typically of the decade of meetings that I've been a part of, it's typical to send the whole presentation back to the audience. Now, that's good, and in many cases we still do that for our clients. However, by giving them the opportunity to pick what's important to them, what they're doing individually is applying impact to every single slide. So if attendee 4 saves a number of slides and a couple of other attendees save those same slides, when we start to look at those numbers, excuse me, those numbers side by side, we can start to identify slides that had the most impact on the audience. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a little bit. But that's a very big portion. So in the early days, it was always just type a note. But what we've done over the years is we've grown this product and we've grown these ideas and we've tried to give them more ability to interact with the content. We've also come up with things like draw a note. So if they want to circle something, I usually see this on charts or graphs or that type of thing, but they can save that to their own personal portfolio. If they want to not necessarily take a note, in the early days we were getting a lot of gibberish notes, and something like this, and they would save that. So it dawned on us that they weren't necessarily looking to take a note, but they were looking just to save a slide. That's where save a slide came from. So that is probably our second biggest button, because that's almost like a Facebook like or a LinkedIn like. This is something that's coming through. I understand it. This makes sense to me. I'm going to save this. This is something I'm going to use later. Those are very important ways for them to interact. Now, all of this is them jumping in and grabbing the information that they want when they want. But it's very important when it comes to engaging your audience to poll them and ask them specific questions, because on one end we're hoping and we're asking them to to show us what was impactful to them, but on the other hand, we're in these meetings, we need to engage them and answer the questions that we want to know. So polling and surveys is a really good way to do it. It's a good way to grab everyone's attention, to get everyone involved, to ask them a specific scenario that is going to be important to the meeting objectives overall. This is a sample polling question. So you'll notice it takes over the screen. It doesn't matter what anyone's doing. When it's time to ask a question, we're all going to answer the question together. So I'll answer this question just with yes. The attendee will answer quickly just by touching the iPad. They'll see that the response was captured. What we will do is we will see it on our side of how many people responded, and then we will push results to all of the iPads. This is probably the only time that my iPad view will be on the main screen. That is just so people can talk and they can discuss the results. It'll also be on all the iPads. This is a very good way for knowledge checks. If we've got a set of scenario that we want to, topics that we want to make sure the audience is aware of, or understands the message that we are trying to relate, this is a great way to check that, because this is going to be a very easy way to see if they get it. Now, CME, continuing medical education, is very good with measuring transfer of knowledge right there within the meeting room. So what they'll do is they will ask a question, the same question. They'll ask that question before the talk. They'll go into the presentation. They'll have the presentation, and then what they'll do is after the presentation, they'll ask them that same question. And what we do is, if they change their minds, what that'll do is that will show side by side of how they answered before and how they answered after. I've done this demo so many times that I press the wrong buttons every single time, but you get the idea. The pre-results and the post-results, and that is a quick way to identify learning. But what's great about this type of technology is because everything is tied back to the individual. In the days of, well, I'll be happy with that transfer of knowledge, what we've been able to do is we've been able to identify opportunities. People that we did not move, or people that we had that did not have any reaction to what we were saying. Another way to do it, and because we're using this type of technology, is we're able to prioritize responses as well. So if we wanted to ask questions to them and say, what is the most important reason for you to do the things that you're doing, or the way that you're going to do it? Well, what we're doing then is, instead of giving them just one opportunity, they're able to grab a couple of ideas and prioritize them to what's important to them specifically. If they want to reprioritize those responses, they can definitely do that and submit. Our system will take all of that, apply weights, and spit out the number one reason as a whole of your audience of why they do what they do in that scenario. So it is very important to be able to use polling. I can't stress that enough. It's very simple. You know the topic of your program. You know the objectives of your program. Ask them. Ask them, did this make sense? And then see where you're going to go from there. Now, there's other ways to do that same type of polling, but then make it a little bit more interesting as far as the audience goes. And we can use gamification. One of the ways we do it, we can do a team-based game, or we can do a self-paced, individualized game. The key with all of these things obviously engagement and interaction of the audience is important, but we need to be grabbing as much information from these individuals who have come, who have flown in, who have traveled in, who are staying with us, who are giving us their time and listening to what we have to say. We definitely need to measure if those messages are resonating with them. Because what that's going to do is that's going to give us the opportunity to either improve our programs or change what maybe didn't work, expand on what really worked, and make your meetings the best they can be moving forward. Like I said, this is not a networking tool. This is not a messaging tool. This is an educational tool. I believe, and I looked at this list, we are all educators. If we are having a meeting and we're having people come into our facility and we are giving them our message and hoping they leave with it and maybe changing the way they do things, this is the best type of tool that you can use to do something like that. Now, I do have a sample here of a self-paced game. This is a good way, a fun way for the audience to interact. I'll just do something really quick. And what this is something that you can do during breaks or before the meeting. And what it is, it's a confidence-based scenario where they'll be able to answer questions and then tell you how confident they were in those responses. So one way they do that is, when a question comes up, what is the capital of Montana? Helena. We can look at those responses and we can say, how sure are you of that response? Because that's going to really change things. You can ask a question in a polling and say, what is the capital of Montana? And if 90% say, well, it's Helena, but you don't know that they all pretty much guessed because that seemed most right, which I just did actually. That is really going to tell you something. So if we start measuring how confident they are in those responses, that's going to be a great way to look at, is there more education needed here? That'll all be tied to a leaderboard that they'll be able to see their scores against their peers that are in that room. But we also give them the ability for some clarifying information, some rationale to why that question was. So we can dive more into this later at a later date, but gaming is a very good way to re-energize an audience, especially after a lunch or a long break or a second or third day of a program. And I'm going to get into education. So that's really the main thing here is the transfer of these ideas to this audience and how they are going to react with them. And we see it. We really do. This program that we've been using. We're able to start looking at the value of the information that the audience is providing us, and we're making a direct correlation to the engagement of the audience. To the engagement of the audience of how they interacted and how they retained that knowledge. People that don't engage that much, who may or may not save a slide or two, we know those ones that sit in the back of the newspaper. We see that typically those that are not engaged by saving slides, taking notes, asking questions, becoming part of the program, tend to get the polling questions wrong. Which is very insightful. And when we start looking at this, because if you're not engaging this audience now, are they leaving with the right message? If you're not doing something in some way to engage this your audience and kind of giving them your story and letting them leave without at least checking to see if they retained any of that, well, then you're leaving yourself wide open for a very low retention of knowledge, because that is just the state of affairs. Persuasion is one of these steps, one of these ways that we can talk about. Persuasion is very good because of the way we're dealing with the content that is being presented. We can open this up as many ways as we want to. By the questions, that you ask, what you make available to the audience as far as resources, brochures, anything, everything that they do is going to be tracked on this system based back to that individual. So if we were going to put a bunch of brochures in here, if we wanted to maybe test the audience on 3 different marketing materials that you're going to go large with, see which one they gravitate towards. Because they may look at one piece of material and then come back and look at something else, and then go back to that. That's the one that's kind of grabbing their attention. All of this is really meant to gauge and capture everything that's important to them. So that is one of the big ones for them as well. So how do we persuade them down our path of thinking? That's going to be included in the games, that's going to be included in the education, that's going to be included in the engagement, and that's going to be included in how we answer their questions and what's important to them while they're in the show. Not to mention the other aspects. So anything that you're going to print, this is 2017. We can make these things available to them online, e-green, any way you want to put it. Presenter bios can be included on this. Animations as far as, if you have any videos you want to make available to them, that is all really part of it. And, one of the main things that we do here is our evaluation sets. Our evaluation sets, excuse me, are robust. And the fact of the matter is that we can start thinking, using this type of technology, we can start thinking of doing this a little bit differently than we've always done it. 3 years ago, so we go to a lot of trade shows, and we share our vision, we share our ideals with multiple different types of industries. And one thing always seemed to be the same is how did the meeting go? What's the ROI of the program? What was important to them? And literally, all of the industries are basing the effectiveness of the program by how straight of a line your attendees can draw through all the 5s and sign their name on the evaluation on day 2. What we're doing, and we found a lot of success, and I'm pushing this on almost all of my clients now, is we've adopted the ideal of hitting them when it's fresh. So after a presentation, after the slides have gone through, after any kind of post-polling, what we do is we can push the specific evaluation to that specific session right then. It's quick, it's easy. I agree with, it did answer the questions I had. It was very relevant to me. But, maybe the presenter wasn't very clear. Maybe the presenter was too fast through those slides. Am I going to remember that on the second day of the second talk of day 1? Not necessarily. I may be doing that to get my credits, get my certification, get my whatever, and get out of there. But remember, the main point of this is to make our programs better. And that's what we can do. So what you don't know can hurt you. Okay? If you're not capturing all of this information and you're going to keep doing the same meeting over and over and over, and you're not going to adjust your message, at some point, I don't need to go to that meeting. I've already done it 3 years in a row. We need to make everything better. And how we make it better is what engagement technology should be all about. We need to analyze this information. All right? We don't need to just analyze the event. We need to analyze the speakers. We need to analyze the audience. We need to analyze the logistics of the program. We need to do these things. We need to look at this. So based on all of this information, based on all of their interactions, there are 2 reports today that are happening. Okay? The number 1 report that we're going to give you, and this we're going to give you right on site. This is a on-site report that the system is going to spit out automatically. This is a report that is going to first, it's going to tell us every email that logged in. Here it is right here. Every email that logged in. So we're going to know everyone who did that. We're going to know every question that was entered into the system, with who asked it, and if we did anything with it. So if we do need to follow up, if we do need to create a document after the fact, we'll know that these questions were asked and answered. You're going to get a summary of the polling results. So every polling question, which I hope all of you will do, if you're not doing, you must ask these questions. Ask a question of your audience. Dive into your audience a little bit. But we will get a summary of all of the results that were, all of the questions that were asked, and then how every single person answered every single question. So this person asked, responded these ways to these questions. And what they do is they almost create a path of information. I talked to a large boating sales organization, believe it or not. And the Boating Sales Association was looking, well, how do we get to this point? How do we know at the end of the day who wants to buy our boats? And what I did is we started talking about, well, just ask them. Ask them in a way that's pleasant. Ask them in a way that when they're already engaged, ask them in a way that they're going to give you the information that you want to know, that you can attack. Actionable intelligence. First question you should be asking at the beginning of the day, do you own a boat? Yes or no? Are you looking to buy a boat? Maybe a little bit later in the day. How much are you looking to spend? If you start applying all of those, and this goes back to that persuasion in a way, if you start looking through those responses, you can quickly identify who needs to be followed up with first. This person is in the mood, he's got the money, and they're ready to move. Those are the type of things that we're going to be able to get when it comes to these individuals and the level of the information that we're capturing. So that goes for the surveys, the evaluations, how everyone answered these questions, how they felt about the program overall, what was important to them, what worked, what didn't work, how that person answered those questions. That is all going to be included, and you're going to be able to look at that on the plane on the way home. So back to excuse me. Here it is. So back to the iPad. So that is going to be the on-site report. The on-site report, and that's going to be immediate, and that's going to be provided for you as you leave the room. The next report I'm going to show you is our engagement insight report. Now this is going to be the impact of the presentation that you just had. And this lives, I put it here on the demo for us, so we'll be able to take a look. And I'll make this bigger so we can kind of take a look. It's going to tell us right off the bat how many people we had, how many people took an action, how many people were highly engaged with the content. So if you look at this information, and we can see that right off the bat, we consider a highly engaged action as taking a note, asking a question, something where they have to type into the iPad. They're highly engaged because they are giving us their insights. But right off the bat, we can see what was the most impactful portion of the program. These three slides had the most questions, the most saves, the most notes. Very quickly, we can see these portions had the most impact. If this was slide 4 and that was the most impactful portion for the audience, maybe next time that needs to be 3 slides. Maybe it needs to be a whole talk. These are going to be insights that you're going to be able to grab by looking at this type of information. We're going to be able to, this is not meant to tell you how great you did in every aspect, okay? This is really meant to say, how can we get better? How can we see that when, and it might be hard to see on the webinar, but this is when slides were saved, when notes were taken, when questions were asked, and when people were looking at the resources. So if, and every meeting's different, if we're going to start with a overview of the information, you're going to see more save slides and notes, because that's going to be an overview of the information. It's not going to be anything new, possibly, that they're going to need to ask questions or learn about. So you'll see on your reports. Now, if that first section is meant to be more of a question-based thing, well, then maybe we need to move one of these other areas or other talks up to the front of the day to get them moving. But that's going to be something you're going to be able to use with engagement timelines. But we're going to look at what's the top save slides, what had the most notes, what had the most presenter questions. It's funny. I was on stage giving a talk once, and it occurred to me while I was there, is we can learn a lot just by looking at this. Why would someone save a slide? It's probably because it's something they knew or they wanted to keep. They might take a note because it's something they just learned and reinforcing their learning with their own note to themselves. And where are they still confused? You know, maybe they're asking a question on these slides because maybe we need to be a little bit more clear. But this is where their responses to what we're giving them. We're allowing them to take this information. We're allowing them to build their own personal portfolio, and by them building their personal portfolios, this is where we're going to get this information. High-level numbers of how many people took notes, how many people clicked on buttons, polling surveys. A lot of this is going to be very, very useful. Now, registered users, you know, this is a high-level look of the engagement of those best users. And as you begin with an engagement technology, these are the ones that are going to interest you. You know, these are the ones that you're going to say, you know, wow, look at this 883 saved slides. That's great. And it is. But as you become more of an expert in pulling the value out of an engagement technology, you're going to start focusing on these people, the people with 3s and 1s and 2s, you know, and you look back and you say, well, why weren't these people engaged? Quick story, advisory board, they brought in, a good friend of mine told me this story, they brought in the best doctor in the world in this specific area to be a part of their advisory board, and they were so excited and they couldn't wait to, you know, just to have him be a part of that conversation. And the first half of the day, he didn't say a word. And at lunch, they went up to him and they said, well, you know, is there a problem? And he says, well, you're not squeezing my lemon. And I thought that made so much sense, because we didn't give these people the opportunity to engage, because the content may have been generic. The ideas might have been common. You know, there was not the discussion. There was nothing to engage those audiences. So if you start using the technology, and we can do this together, we're very short on time, so I want to make sure I kind of touch on this very quickly. But if you start to use this technology, and we start asking these questions, demographic style questions, who are you? What's your role? How long, you know, what is your experience? Then if you go back and you look at these things, what you've almost identified as an opportunity for a different type of training, because you will find in more cases than not, people that do not engage are the most experienced in that area. So you really definitely have to look for ways to engage all of your audience, and not just the ones that may come in and want to do something very quickly. So I'll just sum up with this. Every slide that is presented will have its own report of any notes that were taken on those slides, any questions that were asked while that slide was on the screen. All of this is going to be meant for your post-planning and pre-planning of the next meeting. So if your meetings come up, and this slide obviously is a sample slide, but the questions that are asked, you know, multiple questions about the same thing, maybe that can be addressed in the presentation next time, and we can start to advance. You know, if we look at the notes of these individuals, we can start to see that these are the notes that they sent to themselves. You notice there's no email addresses attached to these. We have that if needed. Typically is not. Typically my clients just want to know that the message of the slide was received, and was received well. So that is definitely part of it, and one of the biggest advantages of the system. So with that, I know we're very short on time. I thank you very much. I will open it up to questions. And John, are there any questions that have come through?
Yeah, just a reminder, if you have a question and it hasn't already been answered, then put it in the question section of the panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible. I have a couple that have come in already, Ryan. The first one is this: do you ever have problems with hotel or convention center Wi-Fi?
No, and the reason is because we avoid it. That's a vulnerability. It's very important for you. I mean, all the time and the effort and the energy that goes into these programs and the flights and the booking and the meetings and the agendas, to put all of that at risk, basing it on the network provided to you by a third party, is just not, it's not optimal. So I don't, with my technology, feel that affects me, because I have gone around it. And it's a very big cost savings as well.
Awesome. I've got another question here. Can this technology be used in a meeting room where there are meetings going on simultaneously on the East and West Coast?
Yes. So there is another aspect of this, and so this is a live meeting setting, but we do have the virtual options of this as well. So we can broadcast this signal around the globe, and we actually, depending on the scenario and the location that we need to address, Educational Measures has partnered with very good partners across the globe. We've got people in Europe, we've got people in Asia, we've got people in South America. We are global at this point, and we've been part of a couple of those programs, tying a couple of those sites in together using that virtual program. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, please send me an email. That's a little bit longer of a conversation, but the idea is just the same.
Great. There's another question here. It seems like a lot of work to set everything up. How long will it take me to get my information into your system?
So that's one of the greatest things about this. This is a service. Okay, so we're going to come in, we're going to handle everything. You're going to send us anything that you would have printed, obviously, and your presentations, and then we're going to design the system for you. It all fits into the same kind of format with the question or with the buttons on the left, interactive tools on the bottom right or on the bottom left, but your slides and all of the information be right there on the right of the screen. It is very important to note too as well is that we don't have to put anything on every single one of those iPads. Remember, they're only accepting a signal. By accepting a signal, if we adjust one thing, it'll adjust all of the iPads instantaneously. A good example of that is the first speaker of the day who's listed on the agenda missed their flight, or their flight was delayed. And so what we're going to do is we're going to push them to the end of the day. Instead of, now you're thinking about your whole agenda's messed up. It's been printed. It's on everybody. It's in everybody's packets in their binder. Hopefully, there's not a lot of binders still being used. But those all need to be changed or mentioned. I mean, that just shows it's not clean. By us being able to adapt and change even presentations at the last minute and send those signals to all those devices, we can keep that constant level of clarity to all the audience.
Great. Ryan, here's another question. What does post-packaging for the attendee look like? And also, can we have personalized branding?
Yes, so branding's a big part of this as well. So, and I don't have any pictures for you, I apologize, but we can put logos, we can change the colors. It's meant to you can match the room. We've got a login screen that can be an image and even be the logos, that type of thing. Splash screens with client information that's looping on all the iPads as they walk in. That's a big piece. But the attendees, what they're going to get after the fact is they're going to get an email, and they're going to get an email of all the information that they requested. That email is going to be masked to come from you, and typically it's thank you very much for coming. We hope you had a wonderful experience. Click here to download your notes, which will be a PDF of every slide they saved, every slide with the note that they put on that with that slide. That'll all be included. But it's a good thing about those emails is they're not a spammy email. It's an email that they're requesting, they're looking forward to, and if they don't get it, they're going to let you know. So it's a very clean delivery of information that they're coming back for. But you can also use that email in any other way you want to. Click here to learn more about XYZ. If you were unable to complete the evaluation, please do it here. That is a very good way to re-engage those audiences after the meeting's even passed.
Ryan, here's another question. Does your system allow for last-minute changes? It's kind of combined with another question. How much time do we need to give you prior to setup? Days, months?
Yes. So we come from CME, which some say is the wild, wild west of meetings. People are known, speakers are known to adjust their slides on the plane flying in, even as they're watching the presentation right before theirs. Our system had to be able to survive in that environment, so we designed it to survive in that environment. Uploading a presentation can be done in minutes. I don't recommend it, obviously. We can facilitate that every single time if needed. I have some clients that do that. But typically, if you can get us your information about a week prior to the program, we'll be able to put it in, look at how it looks on the iPad, send you a link to view it online as a demo, see if there's anything you want to change before we even get on site. So that's really meant to make you, the staff, the technicians, comfortable with what's going to happen in the program.
Awesome. And this is a common question I think we get, Ryan. Do we need to use the iPads? Or can the audience use their own mobile phone or device? Now, one of the main things and the top thing that I say is we minimize vulnerabilities. Anytime you use an event technology, you should be minimizing the vulnerabilities everywhere, because anything that goes wrong is going to show badly on you as the meeting provider. So, yes, short answer is yes, we can use personal devices. However, I look at that in most cases as a vulnerability, because I can look at my phone right now, which I promise you is at 14%. If this was the beginning of a day, then I would not be engaged. I wouldn't last very long. That also opens the ability for digital distraction. So if I'm on my laptop or my own personal device, remember, we are not Wi-Fi. So as soon as they click on email or click on Facebook, they will not have an internet connection. So what they'll need to do is they will jump off of the network, they will go to a Wi-Fi enabled network, and then we've lost them. They're no longer providing us insights into those programs. So short answer, yes. The long answer is minimize the vulnerabilities, keep them engaged, keep their attention, and keep them in your program. Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. One of the participants says, my meeting is next month. Would you be able to move quick enough to accommodate us?
Yes, we will. That is typical in the meetings industry. Meetings pop up all the time. We are flexible. We've been doing this a long time. We've got logistic partners in place. We've got travel in place. We can use all of these items to turn over meetings very, very quickly. To be honest with you, I actually last year turned around a meeting in Cape Town, South Africa in less than 3 weeks. So booking, travel, identifying partners in Africa to facilitate the transfer of the equipment, and that went off without a hitch. And they got some really good data out of the program.
Awesome. Ryan, thanks for a great presentation, and thank you everyone for joining. We will be, as a reminder, we will be sending out tomorrow a link with the recording if you'd like to share that with anybody. We'll also be sending out a set of the slides and an offer of an additional resource that might be helpful for you, the Meeting Technology Buyer's Guide. In addition, we're going to send out a worksheet so that you can begin thinking about and planning your next meeting. I mean, the purpose of today's webinar was to help you begin thinking about what can you possibly do with engagement technology at your next meeting. Along with that, we'll be certain to follow up if you have any meeting needs coming up in the near future or even off a little bit. Please let us know and we will follow up. Thank you for joining our webinar on how to reinvigorate your meetings with engagement technology.